Hey everyone, today I'm gonna show you how I created this animation. Also, before we begin, you can get access to all of my project files, including this one, on my Patreon. I also post exclusive assets and early access videos, so if you're interested, you can click the link down below. So without further ado, let's get started. So I start with putting down a basic plane and a human mannequin. I got mine from the human generator and it comes along with it, but you can use anything that's to human scale. It's just very important to have a reference of what human scale is like so you can scale your assets accordingly. Then I start with proportionally editing the plane to get the type of deformation I'd like, so I can place the focal point of the scene on a more of a higher point compared to the start where the camera is, which is a lower point. Then it's very important to just put a basic block out of the main focal point so you can center the scene around it, so just so you have an idea of what you're working with. After that, I put in a basic sunlight, make it very soft because we're going for a very overcast day, and put its strength to pretty dim. Then, using the silhouette of the hut, I'm gonna place down some cylinders so that we can get a more of a detailed shape on the hut. After that, I'm gonna combine all of them and use a cube to Boolean so that we can create a door. After that, I'm gonna place a few cylinders at the entrance of the door, and then I'm going to get a thatched roof texture from Fab. Then we open a new blend file, put down a new plane, put a hair particle system on it, put down about 100 hair, and use interpolated children, and use noise modifiers, roughness modifiers, clamping, parting, just anything that gives you a decent result. And then we can bring that back into the main blend file and start putting them down. First, I'm just gonna put them down in a very uniform manner. And then I'm going to start scattering them around, put a lot of them, and then you can use the randomized transform and just give them a little bit of a variation, different rotation, different scale. Then also making sure to use different kinds of particle systems. Have a small one, have a longer one, have a medium-sized one, and then scatter them around. And after doing all of that, this is what we have. Then I bring in a tree asset that I created myself in SpeedTree. It has a animation, baked in animation of about 5 to 6 seconds on top of it. It's pretty high quality, so if you'd like access to it, it's available on my Patreon. All of the assets that I create in this video, along with the project file itself, are all available on my Patreon. After that, I start placing a lot of planks on the mill. Right now, at first, obviously, I'm just gonna place a lot of very clean, pristine planks, I guess. And as time goes on, I'll start using Booleans to cut into them and just manually edit and make them non-uniform. So here I start with a few cubes that are joined together, and then I start using them as Booleans. And to keep it interesting, I would recommend using multiple different shapes and sizes that you come up with, and just use them as Booleans on different parts. And then using the holes in the Booleans, I then edit parts of the planks, move them around to give them a bit more of a natural look, and then cut into them again using some Booleans. After that, I realized that I needed a few more variations of the tree because it looked very artificial to just get around one. So I created a few of them. All of them have a looping animation, and then I brought them into Blender and started scattering them around. You should really make sure that you use these trees, especially these just these weird droopy branches that they have, to frame the shot in a way that it leads the eye of the viewer towards the main focal point of your scene. After that, I brought in a sky and just put a basic emission, and then used a gradient at the bottom to darken it and then brighten the top so that it gives a bit more of an atmospheric vibe. Generally, if you just put a basic plane, it looks very flat. I use this so that the bottom doesn't draw that much attention from the viewer. After that, I brought in a principled volume and did the same to that. I used a gradient to darken the bottom and lighten up the top, again because I don't want the bottom to be too bright, because I want the attention of the viewer on the top. I would recommend using a principled volume and not a volume scatter with this. After that, I brought in light blocker at the front just to create a bit more of a dynamic lighting scene. After that, I decided to create another asset that's also included in the asset pack because I wanted a tree with leaves on it. Then I used one of the old trees, cut them up to use them as one of the main focal point tree that basically gives support to the mill that's about to fall down, but it's still keeping it steady. So I basically just start editing parts of it, sculpting parts of it, creating more droopy branches just to give it a bit more of a stylized look to it. After the changes, that's how the scene looks so far. After that, I use an area light again to light up the main focal point a little bit more because it seemed a little too dark for my eyes. After that, I start with the texturing phase. I break up the logs, unwrap them separately so that I can give them a bit more of a randomized texture. Same for the roof textures. I unwrap them separately, give them randomized textures, unsaturate the texture a little, then go on to the mill. Do the same with every single one of the plank sets. Just keep randomizing it and changing different values in the saturations of it. After that, I use some more planks, make them a little more desaturated than the rest because I want them to look like they've been placed, I guess, after the main parts broke down so that it looks like somebody tried to do repairs, but obviously it failed. And then just making it tilt a little. Then I started with the roof, and here I'm just placing down both sides of the roof, and then I'm just gonna randomize parts of them to make it a little more organic. Then I start with the main blades, I guess the fans of the mill. Nothing complicated, just randomizing the placement of the assets a little and duplicating them, all four, putting them in at the back. Then again, changing the location, the rotation, the scale of them to match the exact look I want from them. Then just changing the roughness a little so that you can get a little bit more of a highlight from the actual wood, the graininess and stuff. Then I brought in a Megascans, I guess a small stone wall, and just used it as leading lines towards the main focal point and indicating that there's a path here. After that, I started with texturing the ground. Then I used some displacement, used adaptive subdivision to give the ground some actual like gravel and volume. After that, I started with the grass. I just used just standard like bag up high grass. I used two different kinds, scattered them around, made sure they're not too heavy. Then I used the shrink and grow tools in the geoscatter add-on to give it a little bit more of a variation. That's very important to make the scene look a little more natural. Then I noticed that the grass was way too saturated for what I would want from this scene, so I started changing the materials and then got a look that I was fairly happy with. Then I fiddled a little more with the shrink and grow tools to get them to the point that I'd be happy with them. And then after they started looking a little bit okay, I moved on from the grass. And after the foliage is set, that's how the scene looks so far. After that, I disable all of the grass and the trees so that I can get a bit more of a smoother camera, and because I want to set up the basic animation for the camera, just a basic dolly going in towards the mill, and used a little bit of camera shake from the Shakeify add-on. Then I brought in a few stones, scattered them around. Again, just trying to put them in natural places that they would look okay and organic. Then I brought in a flower. I realized that the scene was looking a little too artificial because there was just grass and that's it, and generally out and about in, I guess, a more of a foresty area like this one, you would have maybe a little bit of flowers there. Animating them using the wind toolset that is also available in the geoscatter add-on. Then I noticed that the planks texture was way too uniform for my taste, so I plugged in an image texture, duplicated the materials, and then used that to change the value and the hue and the saturation of the material. It came out to be pretty okay, like the uniformity was kind of broken and I was pretty happy with how it looked. Then I just made the blades a little more organic and beaten down, like they were just kind of about to fall off type of thing, and that also made it look a bit more natural. Then I had, I guess how Bob Ross would call it, a happy little accident. The old wood thing that I was experimenting with was just there, and it like got on top of the new one in a way that it looked like it was like coming out of each other. It just worked. Then the seam was coming along okay, but I realized that I'd like there to be way more holes than there were inside of the mill. So I guess went to town, just like putting tons of different types of holes and cracks and crevices inside of the mill. And after, I guess, another hour at least of just fiddling around with it and seeing what works, what doesn't, what kind of different shapes that like would make sense as booleans even. And after all of that, it came out like this. Now I decided to do a tinge of post-processing in Blender because, like, I guess I kind of like the glare node, and the lens distortion node is kind of handy. I like, it's better to just do it here and then to take it into DaVinci. Then we bring it into DaVinci, and I cannot stress enough how important post-processing is, especially a free program like DaVinci. It can carry your animations, renders, anything by a lot. So I would heavily recommend you just try out just a little bit of post-processing if you're not a big fan of doing it. And here's the final result. Well, thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the breakdown. I would really appreciate it if you could like and subscribe, and maybe check out my Patreon. I plan to upload more in the future. Thanks.